himself in. Oh, and every day he doesn't, people will die. Starting tonight. I'm a man of my word. Your brother's soul is mine.
Hey, dreadlocks. Where the bomb buck that on?
Harry tells me you're quite the science whiz. You know.
We had to go. Nobody gets hurt.
So you did it while you were putting your clothes back on, dear.
Your brother's
Real slick how mostly put it in my pocket.
Shut up! Isn't even your pocket, is it, son?
Okay, so first of all, what's up? Hopefully everybody's having a great day today. I want to welcome you to something new that I'm doing. This is still a Star Explains, but this one is a little bit different. So, as I always do, let me give a little background on it. A couple years ago during COVID, I was a CNA and I worked at this mental hospital. I probably said this before, but I used to listen to like Stephen King books and different horror books to help me stay up at night. It was the books and then it was the music. Books and then the music. And that got me through a lot of long, hard nights. And one of the books that I listened to, of course, was The Stand. Another one was I listened to the entire Dark Tower series maybe 4 times. Like, that's one of my favorite book series ever. Can't nobody tell me shit about the Dark Tower. Matter of fact, that'd be a long time, but hell, maybe I'll do a breakdown on the Dark Tower series. We'll see going forward. But I had downloaded like the entire audio collection of Stephen King books, and I came across this one, and I was like, well, since I'm taking a long walk, I might as well listen to the long walk, or you know, some corny shit like that we think in the middle of the night. So I started listening to this book, and it just blew my fucking mind. Like, yo, them Bachman books, Stephen King is the GOAT, but his alternate Bachman, bro, is real about his shit. He don't mind getting his hands dirty. So shout out to the Bachman books. Anyway, I started listening to this story, and I identified with the characters so much that I had to do an explained on it. It never once came to my mind that they would be able to make a movie out of this book, but they did. So I wanted to go ahead and do this video before the movie comes out. Hopefully you'll watch the movie, or you'll listen to the video and then you'll watch the movie and be able to tell the differences. All right, so I wrote this book report, I guess you can call it, and I'm going to report it to you. So here we go. Thank you for listening. Oh, and in the background, it will be a game that I made on RPG Maker. The game's not out, but it's called Taking Lives. It's something, a little passion project I was working on. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Trying to get to 200. And yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so let's kind of dive right into it. What is the long walk? Okay, so the long walk is a endurance competition that teenage boys are enticed to join because of the prize that you win at the end. If you make it to the end. If you make it to the end of the long walk, you receive a prize. The prize, as the book calls it. And the prize is basically anything you want for the rest of your life, okay? So basically you're in a walking competition against other boys, and whoever lasts the longest wins whatever they want for the rest of their life. It starts off in Maine. Now, this is a bit of a debated topic, especially in the circles of the long walk, the readers, and it's where it starts off at. I found this map by a gentleman named Patrick Coston, and this is the route that I believe the boys take. Patrick's kind of went through everything, so shout out to Patrick. His website will be in the description below, so if you want to go check that out, you can. He has a map, he has every boy's death, he has basically everything explained, so shout out to Pat. Now, as I was saying, the walk, in my opinion, it takes place in Hamlin, as well as based on Patrick's map, it starts off in Hamlin. So every year around May 1st, the boys line up in Hamlin, Maine, and at 9 a.m. they start walking. Now, before we get to the actual walk, let's discuss the rules. Rule 1 and the main rule is that walkers must maintain 4 miles an hour at minimum. So that's one thing that I realized from watching the movie trailer, is that in the movie it's 3 miles an hour, in the book it's 4, which is a big difference in my opinion. Any walker who speed drops below 4 miles an hour for 30 seconds receives a verbal warning. If you get 3 verbal warnings, you get your ticket. Now, getting your ticket means that you're gonna get pew-pewed, you know what I'm saying? They're gonna light your ass up like a firecracker. A warning can be removed by walking for an hour without another infraction. So if you walk for an hour, then you lose a warning. You know what I'm saying? If you maintain your pace, you don't fall behind for another hour, then that 1 warning you had goes to 0 warning. Also, you cannot leave the road for any reason. Straying off the route or attempting to escape will result in immediate execution. So they finna shoot you straight up if you try to go inside the store, you know what I'm saying, get you a soda or something, you know, they finna light you up. There is no outside help. So nobody in the crowd, onlookers, all of them are forbidden for aiding the walkers in any way. Any spectators who attempt to interfere are subject to arrest or even being shot. Walkers are effectively on their own beyond daily food rations and may also receive limited help from their fellow walkers as long as it doesn't break pace. Also, you cannot stop for any reason. You can the walk never stops. That's one thing about it. The walk never stops. And even later on in the story, the boys, they're like, oh my gosh, the walk's gonna stop because there was like a flood and it washed the bridge out. But them motherfucking soldiers, like, they came up real quick, put down some fucking 2x4s and said, hey, look, y'all better not slow down across these fucking 2x4s. We're gonna light your ass up. We gotta keep that shit moving. Anyway, the walk stops for nothing. You can't stop to pee. You can't stop to sleep. You can't even stop to, you know what I'm saying, to take a dump. Like, one kid had to take a dump while walking, but we're not gonna get into that right now. Also, you cannot interfere with other walkers. Walkers cannot physically impede or attack each other. Violent infractions will lead to a swift ticket. So if you try to attack somebody who's talking shit, which is gonna happen later on, they're gonna light your ass up. All right. And again, the winner, they get whatever they want for the rest of their life. All right. So the walk starts off in Hamlin, Maine, and our main character is a kid named Ray Garraty. Ray is 16 years old. He's from Maine, so he's a hometown kid, which kids from all over the country kind of join this walk. They're all like, yeah, man, I can do it. I can outwalk anybody. They even have Las fucking Vegas placing wagers on certain kids and shit. Like, yo, this kid got the best odds to win. But anyway, as Ray begins the walk, because the gun fires and it's 9 o'clock, the major, he handed out everybody numbers and the walk starts right at 9 o'clock. So as Ray starts walking, he looks over and he sees his mom's face. She's stricken with tears, but there's no turning back. He has to begin the walk. The pack of boys, they begin walking on the road, and you can hear the sneakers and the boots all kind of stomping because they were all close together. And another boy near Ray, he says, so it began. That boy was Peter McVries, who ends up becoming Ray's best friend throughout the walk. Another boy, however, his name is Gary Barkovitch. He smiled and he was all like wolfish looking and shit, like an asshole. You know what I'm saying? He was just an asshole. And he's like, yo, I'll dance on all of your graves. I'm finna win this. And by him saying that, he intended to make it clear that he planned on outlasting and taunting them all. So now it's later on in the morning, and soon a couple of boys started to receive their tickets within the first few hours. The grim reality began to set in, and the initial adrenaline that all the boys had began to fade. And some boys even began to falter as they realized that this was not a game, but a death march. The major's warnings and rules took on deadly intimacy with the first couple of casualties. Just a few miles in, a boy named Curly cramped up with a Charlie horse and stumbled to a stop. Unable to continue, he was issued 3 warnings in rapid succession. Curly screamed and begged for mercy, but 30 seconds after his third warning, the carbines fired. Curly, he bought his ticket and collapsed lifelessly onto the asphalt. There was a crowd nearby. They watched and gasped and then erupted into cheers, as if they were watching a sporting event, while the soldiers promptly dragged Curly's body to the roadside ditch. Now there were 99 boys left. Not long after, Ewing, boy number 9, the boy who wore number 9 on his chest, because remember I said all the boys, they had like numbers on their chest, like they were actually running a marathon. Ewing wore number 9. He earned his infamy as the second victim. He had foolishly worn the wrong footwear. He wore some cheap canvas sneakers, and by mile 7, his feet were bloody and raw through the socks. Ewing's pace faltered from the pain, and despite warnings, he couldn't maintain his 4-mile-an-hour pace. He received his third warning and was shot on the spot, leaving 98 Walker. The march had only just begun, but yet 2 lives were already claimed. Okay, so we're already down 2 boys, and the walk really just begun. And again, like I said, this is an endurance competition, you know what I'm saying? So you need to like wear the best, most comfortable shoes. You need to be prepared physically. They should have been like stretching and shit, like getting loose, but they didn't. Again, there was no real like guidance as far as getting ready for the walk. It was either you were ready or you weren't ready. And apparently our first 2 victims weren't ready. Moving on. Okay, so at about this point, the boys are, I want to say about maybe 3 hours into the walk, and they've arrived to Limestone, which is about 12 miles away from Hamlin. So through this long walk, like one thing that's not against the rules is taunting and antagonizing somebody. And that's exactly what happens around 11:15 and mile 19. So it's 11:15 a.m. in the morning and we're at mile marker 19 or mile 19. The boy Barkovitch had found a little nervous guy who was kind of just walking by himself. And Barkovitch is like, well, the faster some of y'all die, the faster this motherfucker walk will be over. Which is kind of smart when you think about it, but it's fucked up at the same time. Barkovitch started to whisper shit at him like, you're dead, bro. Just give up. Go ahead, lay over there and die, man. Ain't no point, you know? Just go ahead, sit down, let them punch your ticket, you know, and then the rest of us, you know, we'll be good. Shit, you know you don't want to do this no way. And the boy's like, shut up. You don't tell me, shut up. And because of this antagonization, the boy caught a warning. And Barkovitch, he's still like, yo, just give up, man. Ain't no point in even being here, you know what I'm saying? You know you just want to sit down, look at the ground, look at it. You know you tired, look, you breathing all heavy and shit, look at you. You ain't even in shape enough for this walk. You think you gonna beat us, all us? The boy's like, shut up. Like, hey, look, man, you know, you might as well just go ahead and give up, you know what I'm saying? Go ahead, let them kill you up here, you know what I'm saying? That way your family ain't gotta see it, you know? Man, shut up. And the boy lunges at Barkovitch and catches his third warning. The rifles sound out, and because he lunged at Barkovitch and they shot him, his body rolls over into a ditch. Did Barkovitch care? Hell no. Barkovitch started laughing about that shit. And he says Barkovitch says this a lot. He's like, yo, another grave to dance on. Because Barkovitch told the boys earlier in the walk, he was like, yo, I'm finna dance on all y'all graves. Y'all don't know. I'm finna 2-step on y'all shit. So because of Barkovitch, that boy ended up dying, and that's gonna come back to haunt him. The other boys, they looked away in disgust, and Garraty even clenched his fist. He hated Barkovitch more than anyone. And now our walker count is at 97. Okay, so now it's around 12:30 and the boys have finally reached 30 miles. They're at Caribou now. Caribou is a city in Maine. It's one of Maine's most isolated cities, away from any other city. And as the boys walked, as they entered Caribou, banners stretched across the streets high, bands played on the sidewalks, and it was people overcrowding like they were watching a parade. But to the boys, this whole scene was grotesque. It was like they felt like they were circus animals being marched through the streets. A girl ran out through the crowd and she seen Garraty and she gave him a kiss and all that, you know what I'm saying? She gave him a kiss and Like he copped a feel and everything. And the book is a little bit more in depth about these feelings. Like these are teenage boys. So, you know what I'm saying? I can't talk about it, but he got those teenage feelings, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, Garraty held on to that for as long as he could throughout this walk, but we're not gonna get into that too much. It basically gave him a boost though, and he felt great as the walk continued on. However, up into Caribou, we lost some more walkers, and our walker count is now at 93. As the group pressed south of Limestone, more boys failed to keep pace or made fatal mistakes. One boy simply slowed down too much and was executed once his warnings ran out. Another, Zuck, he wore number 100 on his chest. He had an old cut on his knee reopened, and he started to hemorrhage badly. Then he bought it. He collapsed from the blood loss. Then the soldiers made sure to give him his ticket. Another boy named Travin had suffered from sudden diarrhea, an agonizing inconvenience under the no stopping rule. He veered into the roadside, half squatting in desperation, and the soldiers continued to shout at him. When he didn't comply, they opened fire. Travin was blown away with his pants still wrapped around his ankle, dying at the roaring approval of spectators. Within the first 10 miles, 10 boys were dead. Lawson, he wore number 60, was another early exit after repeatedly stumbling. He muttered, "I'm done," and simply sat down in the road from exhaustion, unable to go on. The guards gave him his final warning, which he ignored, and a crack of the rifles later, Lawson's prophecy fulfilled itself. He was done, permanent. Fetter, another boy, he wore number 12, he was racked by a severe muscle cramp in his calf. Before he could recover, he ran out of time, and the soldiers gunned him down in the back from falling below the speed too much. And I'm sorry if it do seem like I'm reading. I am reading. I kind of had to write these notes down and shit. So thank you for bearing with me. Hopefully you're kind of enjoying what's going on a little bit. It's a lot of death, but hopefully you're enjoying. Each of the boys' bodies was unceremoniously hauled into a ditch by the accompanying soldier, and the walkers were forced to march past the bloody remains of their peers. Some of the boys stared in horror at each corpse. Others kept their eyes forward. Garraty swallowed hard and clenched his teeth as he walked past the still twitching body of Fenner. The lesson was seared into everybody's mind. This is not a friendly competition. This is survival of the fittest, enforced by bullets. Okay, so now it's like the afternoon. All that basically happened in the morning. The boys have arrived to Caribou. We are about 30 miles or 7 hours into the long walk, and the remaining walkers reached the city limits of Caribou, Maine. Okay, so yeah, they're roughly 44 miles past the starting point. My bad. What should have felt like an encouraging milestone felt a little hollow after the bloodshed from this morning. Caribou turned out in great force to greet the walk. Crowds lined Main Street. The high school band even fucking played their fight song, and little children even waved at them. "Good luck, long walkers," and shit like that. Too exhausted, however, the boys, they barely even noticed. Like, the whole town and shit, that shit felt gross to them. Like, it was like, yo, y'all sitting here watching a death march, and y'all is just like happy about it. Also, to some of the walkers, they were disappointed by Caribou's ordinariness. It just felt like another run-of-the-mill service town. McVries even made a joke that it didn't even seem much different from Limestone. The walkers walked past a warm pool of news cameras, and they kind of felt like a surreal experience of disconnect between the crowd's excitement and their own growing misery. It just felt weird to be there. All right, so just past the town of Caribou, tensions within the group began to kind of rise a little bit. One of the boys, again, his name is Gary Barkovitch. He wore number 5 on his chest. The boy began to kind of like boast and shit, and he was taunting the other boys like, "Yeah, I'm gonna dance on you fuckers' graves. Y'all just don't know. Y'all just don't know. Y'all might as well sit down, you know what I'm saying? You know you're tired. Go ahead, take a seat." Which in my opinion, it isn't a bad strategy. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's, again, you're walking until everybody else dies. So if you can kind of like trick somebody into like giving up and shit, you know, it ain't such a bad strategy. However, this started to piss off one boy. His name was Rank. Rank, he got tired of Barkovitch talking his shit, and you know what I'm saying, Rank has kind of been going through it. He been limping these last couple miles and shit, and he was on the edge of collapse. As Barkovitch was jogging backwards in front of him, grinning and shit, whispering, "You're slowing down. You hear the gun cocking for you?" Rank lost his shit and fucking lunged at Barkovitch, swinging his fists and shit. The soldiers, they instantly told Rank, "Hey, look, bro, stop this shit. There's no interference rule." Rank ignored them and continued charging at Barkovitch. He only managed to get a glancing blow at Barkovitch before the rifles cut his ass down. Rank caught multiple bullets mid-stride and went down hard, dead before he even hit the pavement. The crowd was watching this shit as if somebody scored the touchdown. They let out a roar and shit. They was all, "Ah, yeah, that's what I'm talking about." They was all amp over the shit. And Barkovitch himself, he even broke into a hysterical laugh, even did like a little twirl and shit, and did like a little victory dance. He danced on Rank's grave like he promised he would. Then he started saying, "Yeah, another one down, another one down. I'm gonna dance on all y'all graves." He gloated and drew murderous glares from all the other boys. Peter McVries even fucking spat at him in disgust and said someday somebody's gonna shut him up for good. The boys remained walking in a collective, ostracizing Barkovitch from that moment on. Everybody kind of agreed that his ass would walk alone. He was hated by everybody. By the time they left Caribou behind, 92 walkers remained. 8 had died on day 1 so far. As the boys press on, it starts to become evening time, and they are currently outside of Caribou and on their way to Holton or Hooten. The sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the pavement. A few local farmers and their families had gathered to kind of watch the spectacle. They kind of like cook their dinner on grills and shit, and they having a whole fucking tailgate like it's a fucking football game or something. The boys, you know what I'm saying, of course they was getting hungry by smelling the burgers and shit on the grill, but none of them ran over and tried to ask for a burger and no shit like that because, again, that's against the rules. Garraty, he started to feel a throbbing pain in his legs from walking so much. The euphoria and terror of the starting line, it felt like ages ago. Now, roughly at the 12-hour mark, fatigue started to settle in deeply into everyone's bones. Many boys moved with stiff gray looks on their faces, kind of looking like zombies and shit. They had roughly covered about 50 miles before nightfall on day 1. Small towns passing in the distance, aiming for the next major town by morning. Garraty's feet were blistering and his thighs burned with each step. He whispered to McVries, "Feels like I've been walking my whole life already." McVries gave a bitter, knowing grin. "You'll get used to it, or you won't." Night brought cooler temperatures and new torments. Without the sun, temperature dropped, and the boys found that walking kept them much warmer than slowing down. Some boys actually increased their pace slightly right after sunset just to fend off the chill. Because again, it's May, springtime is there, but also as somebody who grows like peppers and shit, in the northern states, it stays a lot colder longer than in the southern states. So like, let's say in May in Georgia, it'll be like 85, 86 degrees outside. But in Maine, where the story takes place, it'll be like 75, closer to 80 maybe. But at nighttime, them temperatures is gonna plummet. And that's kind of what's going on here. The soldiers, to kind of illuminate the road, they turned on the floodlights on their half tracks and trailed right along the boys closely, ever more vigilant for stragglers. On the first night, sleep depravity began to gnaw at them. None of the boys had slept since the night to now started to have heavy eyelids and drowsiness. To to add to their agony. Garraty felt himself zoning out. More than once, his eyes drifted shut for a few seconds as he walked. Each time was subtle, a subtle weave in his path or a slackening in his pace brought a warning which snapped him out of it. His heart began to pound each time, which kept him up for a while. There would be no sleep for a long walker, not until you're dead. Garraty finally understood the real horror of the contest. The journey would only end in death or victory, nothing in between. So now it's about midnight, and midnight came and went. Bonfires glowed in the distance from farm fields, and silhouettes of spectators with flashlights could be seen lining the roadside. But the crowds had thinned out considerably in the rural darkness. Occasionally, a drunk spectator would wander too close and would be chased off by soldiers, but many of the walkers were alone with their anguish. The pace line stretched out as the boys forged ahead, while some lagged behind, each man truly in his own battle now. Throughout the first night, the silence was broken again and again by the bark of the .30 carbine rifle. The attrition continued. One boy let out a strangled, gargled scream and pitched forward, dead, before he could hit the ground. Garraty caught a glimpse of the boy's football jersey as he went down. Another walker stumbled to sheer exhaustion and fainted mid-stride. As he crumbled on the asphalt, he would never rise again. The soldiers lit his ass up where he lay. In one grim instance around 2 a.m., 3 boys collapsed almost simultaneously within minutes of each other. Like marionettes whose strings were cut, the troopers dispatched each one with a single shot. The reports crackled through the night like fireworks. However, though, not everybody died from fatigue or slowing down. One boy panicked, and when a dark spot came up, his ass took off running into the woods and shit. He was like, shit, they ain't gonna get me. If it's like deep forest and shit, maybe I could like shake it out and shit, you know what I'm saying? But unfortunately, the soldiers caught up to his ass, you know what I'm saying? They used heat-seeking goggles and all that shit. They seen his ass soon as he left the road and lit his ass up. His body tumbled into a ditch, almost illustrating the major's rule that by leaving the road meant death. Other walkers barely had time to register that there was an escape attempt before they were ordered to keep moving. By the dawn of day 2, the cost of the first 24 hours was shockingly high. Nearly 30 boys had been killed in one way or another. The original 100, now only about 70 remain. Trudging early into the morning of May 2nd, Garraty blinked in the pale sunrise. Garraty looked around at the faces around him and realized that most of the boys that were around him were already gone. There was no time to mourn the dead or time to process the trauma. Only thing the survivors could do was march onward deep into the heart of Maine, each hoping he might somehow be able to outlast death himself. Now, again, this book is extremely detailed. What I did was I kind of went through day by day and kind of like took things out of it. And I hope you're getting an overall idea of the story. I haven't really went over any of the conversations that the boys had, which in the next day or chapter, I will kind of go over some of the conversations that they had. And, you know, they're guys, you know, they're guys walking, and of course they're going to try to befriend each other. But yeah, let's fucking get into it. This one is, again, one of my favorite books. Again, I'm not telling all the details. Like back earlier, like 5 miles outside when the walk started, 5 miles when the walk started, a girl ran up to Garraty and she gave him a kiss and he copped a feel and shit, and he ended up getting bricked up. But I'm not gonna get into that because, again, this is a book that either you have to listen to or read for yourself. But that is something that did happen. And of course, the guys, they talk about guy things. They talk about, oh, are you still a virgin? Are you still a virgin? Stuff like that, which I'm not necessarily gonna get into deep. I kind of want to keep it focused on the main story because, again, this video is probably already gonna be long. Okay, so we're on to day 2. And it's morning, of course, morning, middle of the night. And the boys, of course, they're still walking. and they finally reach Holton. On the second day, it started off with light rain and drizzle, adding mud and chill to the walkers' misery. By mid-morning, roughly 24 hours since the start, they finally entered the town of Holton. They were about 96 miles into the long walk. And the town of Holton, it sits like right near an interstate junction. Anyway, the residents of Holton turned out in force. Like, yo, even though it was raining, they was like, fuck that, we gonna go see this shit. We gonna see some boys get dropped, you know what I'm saying? The boys passed under a turnpike overpass at the edge of the town. A cluster of onlookers leaned over the railing, clutching their coffee and donuts, mouths full of Dunkin' Donuts as the walkers walked beneath them. The absurd normalcy of it, the smell of pastries and coffee from the commuters above made some of the boys laugh deliriously. Only for a moment though. Garraty even imagined that he was simply on a morning jog and those people were friendly spectators at a marathon. The illusion quickly shattered when they passed by a parked half-track with its mounted guns aiming at them. He nearly stumbled over a dark stain on the road that belonged to one of the walkers who died overnight. Despite the carnage of the first day, a kind of grim camaraderie began to form among a core group of the walkers on day 2. Garraty found himself befriending a few and managed to even keep pace with them. One boy, who wore number 3 on his chest, Art Baker, he was a polite Southern boy. Another, Hank Olson, he started out cocky but was now frightened. Hank Olson wore the number 70 on his chest. Another boy named Abraham, he wore number 2 on his chest, and he was from the Midwest. He was pretty much the jokester of the group. And then we had Peter McVries. He wore number 61 on his chest. He was a sharp-tongued boy from New Jersey, and he ended up becoming Garraty's closest friend and ally through this journey they took together. The boys talked together intermittently to keep their sanity, sharing bits about their lives, and even as exhaustion made their conversations disjointed, somewhere south of Holton, the legendary walker Scramm, number 85. He had everybody in Vegas had the odds for this dude. Like, if anybody was going to win the walk, it was going to be Scramm, or so Vegas thought. Scramm revealed in a hoarse voice that he had a pregnant wife who was at home waiting for him. This revelation earned murmurs and respect from the others. Scramm clearly had something to live for, and Scramm always said, and this is a line that stuck with me, like when I was reading it or when I was listening to the book, I've just got to keep putting one foot in front of the other. I will for them. Keep picking them up and putting them down. That's all that I'm worried about. Yo, and when I heard that shit, like I was, yo, that shit, all I would do is pick them up and put them down. And like to hear picking them up and putting them down, that shit hit. Shit, I even did like an extra round for my coworker when I heard that shit. But anyway, Garraty was deeply moved by Scramm's sense of purpose. It made him think of his own girlfriend, Jan. Garraty vowed silently that he would survive long enough to see Jan's face in the crowd when they passed through their hometown of Freeport, Maine. Still hundreds of miles down the road, but he made that promise to himself that he would see Jan and he would see his mother again. That became Garraty's lifeline though. He kind of clung to that. He always held on to that throughout the entire walk. I'm gonna get to Freeport, I'm gonna see Jan, and I'm gonna see my mother, no matter what. Each boy nursed similar private motivation, a loved one, a promise, a dream of the prize, all to keep death at bay for at least another mile. The boys' good spirits would be tested soon by the relentless enforcement of the rules. The walkers collectively held resentment towards the major and the soldier, and as day 2 went on, their resentment grew stronger. To these teenage boys, the faceless armed guards on their half-tracks now seemed like cruel wardens. When the major made himself a brief appearance on a Jeep to oversee the morning distribution of the food concentrate in canteens. Okay, let me go over the food concentrate. So the food concentrates are nothing but like paste and shit. You know what I'm saying? They don't really want you kind of like choking on a sandwich when you're trying to walk and shit. So they give you like paste. They give you like tuna paste, mashed potato paste, cheese paste, shit like that. And they give you crackers as well. So they give you like shit so you don't choke. Anyway, the boys greeted him with a stony silence and glare. Not long after that, all their pent-up frustration and anger began to explode around noon in the middle of nowhere along Route 1. McVries suddenly stopped walking and turned to face the half-track, squaring his shoulder. He decided that enough was enough. He was tired of being treated like a pawn. McVries shouted furiously at the soldiers, cursing at them and cursing the major's name, daring the major to come out and fight him man to man. The gas from the other walkers walking by was crazy. Like, they was like, damn, bro, we can't believe you fucking out here. You fucking wilding out. You crashing out right now. Yo, and he was seriously going off on the major. Like, for real. He wanted to fight that dude. McVries was voluntarily breaking pace, effectively committing suicide. A soldier raised his bullhorn and barked, warning, warning, at McVries, who stood defiantly in the road, his legs spread apart, nearly inviting a bullet. In that moment, Garraty acted on instinct and grabbed McVries, yanking his arm forward, forcing him to start walking again, just as the soldiers had begun to aim their weapon. McVries stumbled and regained his footing and shot a fierce look at Garraty, half in anger, half in gratitude. The half-track's loudspeaker crackled. Maintain pace, 61. McVries had been spared a ticket thanks to Garraty's quick intervention. However, a few hours later, Garraty would need a little bit of saving himself. The grind of the road and the lack of sleep finally caught up with Garraty. In the middle of the afternoon on day 2, without warning, he was overcome with a wave of panic and claustrophobia. The sensation that he couldn't lift his legs not one more step had kicked in. His breath sped up and he tilted to the horizon. Garraty's vision suddenly began to narrow and blur. He was beginning to fall unconscious. He staggered, nearly tripping over his own feet, hyperventilating, and a warning rang out. Warning, warning 47, maintain 4 miles an hour 47. Garraty heard it dimly, but his body was seizing with panic. In the nick of time, McVries moved. McVries threw an arm around Garraty and steadied him, walking in lockstep and urging Garraty on with a harsh whisper. Come on, Ray. Come on. Stay with me. You don't get the check out yet. Walk, you idiot. Walk. Garraty's heart thundered, but McVries supported him every step of the way, snapping him out of his daze and forcing his legs to keep moving, just fast enough that the soldiers backed off. Garraty's breathing finally became under control and the immediate crisis had passed. McVries had saved Garraty's life, walking him through a panic attack. The two exchanged looks of profound understanding in this merciless ordeal. All they had truly at this moment was each other, this act of mutual kindness. However, this didn't sit well with everyone else because the sense of camaraderie, their camaraderie, stirred resentment in the other struggling loner boys. So now it's about mid-afternoon and cracks begin to show amongst the boys in their camaraderie. One walker who was deteriorating badly was Hank Olson, number 7. Hank had been one of Garraty's earlier companions. Olson started to walk full of bravado, making jokes, smoking cigarettes on the road, proclaiming that he was raring to rip, but the continuous miles had broken his spirit. By the second afternoon, Olson had become a hollow version of himself, plodding along in a near catatonic state, eyes unfocused and face slack. He stopped responding to conversations and appeared to retreat entirely into himself. mechanically putting one foot in front of the other. Stebbins, the quiet loner, always in the back, cryptically advised Garraty to watch Olsen. Olsen's got the secret to it. Sure enough, Olsen was on autopilot and dangerously close to dipping below 4 miles an hour as all of his willpower drained away. In a moment of compassion, Garraty jogged over to Olsen and shook him, trying to snap him out of his stupor. "Hank, don't give up. Not now. Come on now. You can do this," Garraty yelled, even as a warning or two blared for Olsen. Remarkably, Olsen rose from his daze. He did not resume walking steadily. Instead, he awakened to pain and despair. Olsen began to scream with a ragged cry of rage. Olsen suddenly sprinted directly towards the nearest soldier who was sitting on the side of a half-track. With Olsen's face twisted and full of fury and exhaustion, he tried to attack the armed soldier barehanded. "You bastards!" he howled, guns swinging instantly towards him. For a split second, everybody watched, stunned. Olsen had completely snapped and decided to commit suicide by soldier. The troopers opened fire, cutting Olsen down in a hail of bullets. He couldn't even touch the half-track. Olsen's body tumbled to the pavement, filled with holes. The other walkers stood, or they didn't stand. They walked, but they couldn't help but look at Olsen's corpse as they walked past. Garraty felt sick to his stomach with guilt. He had only meant to help Olsen, but he ended up bringing him back to awareness. Perhaps he hastened Olsen's breakdown. It was a sombering reminder. Sometimes a quick death is the only way out of this night. With Olsen's dramatic end, the afternoon wore on under the gray sky. The remaining boys pushed through the countryside in small hamlets. Sometimes locals cheered, other times they were greeted by eerie silence. Many walkers were now nursing injuries, twisted ankles, bleeding feet, chafed groins, sunburned faces. Every step was torture. By stopping, but stopping only meant death. To cope, the boys talked and fantasized out loud. Garraty told anyone who listened about Jan and how he hoped to see her in Freeport. Describing Jan's smile in detail, trying to find a light in this despair. The others spoke out why they joined the long walk in the first place, often with a bit of humor. Garraty admitted to McVries that he himself felt a strange compulsion to participate, something he couldn't fully explain. McVries in turn revealed that he had enlisted almost out of spite, to thumb a nose at the world that had hurt him so badly. He hinted to a heartbreak and a facial scar from an ex-girlfriend. Abraham chimed in wryly that he almost hadn't backed out because his hometown treated it like a big joke, and he figured he'd go and give him a show. These dark confessions momentarily helped forgetting the unending pain in their legs. One figure stayed silent, Stebbins, number 88. He remained in the very back of the pack at all times. That afternoon, Stebbins engaged with Garraty in a brief, enigmatic chat. He calmly told Garraty that he planned to win. In fact, he knew that he would win because, in his view, every other walker wanted to lose. They all had a death wish, Stebbins suggested, whether they knew it or not. From the very beginning, Garraty didn't like Stebbins. Like, when they first rolled up to the starting line and everybody was sitting down, resting and eating sandwiches and shit, trying to get that last little rest in before they had to do this long ass walk, Stebbins was sitting in a tree eating a jelly sandwich, chilling. And ever since Garraty saw him in that fucking tree, it was just something about him that pissed Garraty off. Continuing on, Garraty was unsettled by Stebbins' quiet confidence. Something about Stebbins, with his raggedy clothes and distant gaze, made Garraty wonder if perhaps Stebbins was the devil in disguise or some supernatural ringer. Stebbins only smirked and riddled when Garraty probed further. The conversation left Garraty with a cold knot of fear in his stomach. Could Stebbins be right? Did he indeed have a death wish deep down? Garraty tried to shake the thought as the afternoon dragged on into the evening. So now it's starting to become evening time. By the time the sun set on day 2, the walkers had nearly covered 140 miles. They covered 140 fucking miles. Like, god damn. Like, yo, 140 miles. Like, imagine walking 140 miles in 2 days. Like, in all honesty, I don't think anybody has walked that far since the slaves tried to escape from the South. Like, no lie, nobody's had a reason to walk that far. Currently, the boys, they're like, I want to say Route 1 heading south, and they're on their way to the fictional Old Town, Maine. Now, this is a place that I think is fictional. Let me look at the map. Well, no, it's not fictional. It's the way that Stephen King changed the spelling. It's spelled as Old Town altogether, and it's Old Town separate. So, yeah. All right. By the time dusk came, the crowd presence along the route swelled again in the even cooler evening hours. People handed out cups of water or fruit slices at their own peril. One teenager who had watermelon slices even ran out and tried to give the boys watermelon. But, you know what I'm saying, he threw the shit, and after the police grabbed his ass, but he threw the shit, and even some of the boys, they caught the fucking watermelon and was like slurping it and eating it up and shit. However, most of the walkers, they kind of ignored this shit and kept walking out of fear of slowing down. You know what I'm saying? However, a few, again, a couple of them grabbed some of the shit and like was wolfing it down. However, one boy who wolfed down an orange, he threw that shit up minutes later due to exhaustion. In the evening, rain squalls moved in, making the road slick. The major's rules allowed the walk to continue. Even though it was a rainstorm outside, this shit would carry on. Like, the major didn't give a fuck if it was a fucking hurricane out there with a tornado in the fucking eye and shit. He wouldn't give a fuck. You gonna keep walking, goddammit. Or the wind gonna take all y'all asses away, but the last person still standing, he fucking win. The major ain't play that shit. A damp wind picked up. The boys shivered in their light clothes, and blisters softened into oozing sores in their wet shoes. Oh my God. Now, imagine that. Like, your feet is all blistered and bloody, and then you gotta deal with wet fucking socks. Like, I don't like dealing with wet socks on a regular. Imagine having to walk all fucking day and then have to deal with wet socks. Ugh. Anyway, yet the grim procession continued on at no less than 4 miles an hour. Garraty felt the pain with every step. His blisters had burst, and each footfall was like stepping on knives. He kept going though, with sheer willpower and the thought of seeing Jan again in Freeport. He also glanced over at McVries and Baker, drawing strength from their presence. As darkness fell on day 2, more walkers would reach the end of their dirt. Fatigue was unforgiving and was a killer. Now that they had been awake and moving for nearly 36 hours, one boy named Collie Parker had begun loudly cursing at Maine's lousy weather and the pig spectator. But before nightfall, even Parker would grow quiet and glass-eyed. Another boy near Garraty, whom everyone just called Doc, collapsed without warning. Doc had been muttering medical advice to himself for hours. Keep hydrated, watch for pneumonia, and then, ironically, his legs simply gave out and he crumbled into a delirious pile, quoting Latin until the guns put him out of his misery. The others marched on, barely reacting. Death had become a routine. Shortly before midnight, the walkers entered the outskirts of Old Town, Maine, which lies near the larger city of Bangor. The route had become complicated, snaking through back roads and across a bridge as directed by signs and lead vehicles. They passed Old Town around midnight, navigating through the deserted streets lit by flickering orange arc lamps. The Stillwater River ran along the road, its dark waters giving off a damp chill. Here, for the first time, the crowd's presence diminished significantly. Only a sparse scattering of locals watched at watched from their windows and stood on their porches as the boys walked by. The quiet was eerie, but in some ways a relief. For the first time all day, the walkers weren't under a gauntlet of screaming fans. In a poignant note, not a single walker died in Old Town. Perhaps the calmer atmosphere helped, or perhaps it was just luck. The remaining boys managed to push through the center of Old Town without anyone hitting their limit. As they crossed a small bridge out of town, the street lights grew sparser and the night deepened once again. The brief lull in casualties wouldn't last long. Okay, so now it's nighttime and the boys have just left Old Town and they're joining a longer road that runs parallel to I-95, the I-90 turnpike for a stretch. The distant rush of the cars on the highway was a constant reminder that normal life carried on for the rest of the world, even as these boys were locked in a life or death struggle. In that same dreary stretch of early morning darkness, Hank Olson's grim prediction came true. Before Olson's breakdown and death earlier, he had bitterly told the others, "You see, a lot more of us will go down during the night." Indeed, Hank Olson's collapse had signaled a cascade. Over the second night, several more walkers had succumbed to exhaustion and made fatal errors. One boy, delirious from lack of sleep, imagined he saw a comfy bed on the roadside and literally sat down on the road to sleep. He was snoring when the soldiers punched his ticket. Another, hallucinating, believing his feet were made of glass. If he took another step, he'd shatter. He stopped in confusion and was promptly shot. The hours between midnight and dawn on the third day became a blur. Garraty trudged onward in a half state of confusion, barely aware of his surroundings. When dawn broke on the third day, he was shocked to discover how many of his fellow walkers bought their tickets during the night. As the pale light spread, several familiar faces were missing, including that of his friend Pearson. Garraty learned from McVries that Pearson, the chess-playing, glasses-wearing boy who carried 99 pennies with him, had collapsed overnight, just as Barkovitch had eerily predicted that he would. Indeed, shortly before his own death, Barkovitch had taunted that a bunch more of you will give up in the dark. In the cold light of day 3, Garraty realized that Barkovitch had been right. The walkers' ranks had been brutally thinned out in the small hours. And that's it for day 2. We on to day 3 now. Let's get it. Okay, so I decided to break this bad boy up into 2 parts. Why? Nobody's gonna watch a 2-hour video. I don't care how good it is, unless you falling asleep to it or some shit. And if you are, first of all, thank you for watching my video. Please throw your boy a sub. I'm trying to get to 200 by the end of this year. But again, this one, I may have not been 100% accurate with everything. I may not have mentioned every little detail. I'm sorry, my fellow Stephen King people, but I wanted to kind of keep it going, as they say. But yeah, part 2 will be out soon. Thank you so much. And yeah, have a good one.